connected here. So we appreciate your patience, and let us know if you have any questions. You can do that by typing in the public chat box, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Thank you. Hi everyone, this is Abra from CLPHA. Good afternoon. Just fielding a couple questions from folks via email who are having trouble getting connected, so bear with us for just a moment or two. Thank you.
Abra, can you hear me?
Hi everyone, this is Abra from CLPHA. We are just going to give folks one more minute to get connected, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for your patience. Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Abra from CLPHA. I know a couple folks are having just a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think to honor everyone else's time, we will go ahead and get started. As always, we are recording this webinar, so if you missed the first few moments or you want to rewatch at a later point or share with a colleague, that is always an option. I will send a follow-up email either tomorrow or the day after, depending on when the recording comes through, letting folks know where they can access that on our housingiS.org clearinghouse. And I will also at that point resend the fact sheet that was attached to the calendar invite for this event, which puts together a lot of really great information that you're going to hear about today. Just the other couple housekeeping items. So everyone is on mute, so you cannot talk to us. So if you do have questions, and we hope that you do, please put them in the public chat box. That's the box that you can find on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. You can go ahead and type your message there. We will be taking questions at the end from our two presenters, who I will introduce in just a moment. You can also always send me an email, which I'll go ahead and type in just a moment in the chat box if that's easier for you. I will keep an eye on that throughout this, and then after if you have any feedback for us. Otherwise, if you haven't registered already, we encourage you to register for our upcoming Housing Is Summit. This is our annual cross-sector event that we do. This is the 6th year that we're doing it. This year it will be April 30th and May 1st here in Washington, D.C. Love to have you join us. Lots of folks from this group have been a part of this event, and some of you will be presenting. So would love to see everyone there. Let me know if you need the link to register or have questions about that event. I'll put that shortly in the public chat box as well. So with that, I think that's all of our housekeeping items. I'm very pleased to have our presenters with us today. Alex Elson and Alex Shebanow, both the director and an attorney who have been working on this critical issue of predatory for-profit institutions. And I'm sure I don't have to tell any of you that that is something that really affects a lot of public housing residents. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to turn it over to Alex, and he will introduce himself further.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Abra, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share a bit about our work and more the issue of predatory for-profit colleges. For me personally, this is an issue that I've been working on for almost 7 years now. I had the opportunity to write, direct, and produce the documentary Fail State, which came out in late December 2018 on STARZ. It's a big feature-length expose documentary on American higher education, and we talk a lot about for-profit colleges. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague at Student Defense. I'm also a policy fellow at the National Student Legal Defense Network, and I've had the privilege to be working with some of the most talented attorneys who are representing students who've been defrauded and misled by for-profit colleges. Alex, if you want to say a couple things.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Is my sound working? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice to be here. I'm Alex Elson. I am an attorney and one of the co-founders of the National Student Legal Defense Network, Student Defense for short. Previously, I worked at the Department of Education on issues relating to borrower defense to repayment, which is essentially student loan forgiveness based on misconduct, fraud by colleges, and was there for almost 3 years. After that work became unfavorable by the current administration, I switched jobs and am now working at this nonprofit organization called Student Defense, where we focus, it's mostly consumer protection work, all on issues related to student debt. So we focus on the Department of Education and regulatory rollbacks that, regulations that protect students. We will sue when those regulations aren't enforced or when they're delayed. And we also will sue predatory colleges for defrauding students. and a wide range of other policy issues surrounding predatory colleges and federal student loans. And so I'm very happy to be here. We've been in existence for just over 2 years and have a fairly wide array of cases. So we can talk today a little bit about our work and about our clients and about how that relates to the work that you guys do.
And I guess, you know, to piggyback off what Elson just said at the last part there, why are we speaking here? And a lot of it is just with what for-profit colleges are, who they target. And when we were given this opportunity to do this webinar and speak, it's largely because a lot of public housing residents are the prime target for predatory for-profit colleges. You might, you know, think of payday lending and all sorts of, you know, the wide gamut of consumer protection issues. This is an issue that, you know, I want everyone to walk away from today thinking about, oh, you know, in higher education, this is also a consumer protection issue. And this is something that we should try to be protecting our residents from. So I guess to give kind of a quick crash course in what for-profit colleges are, to get the first slide. So you might have actually seen these colleges, whether it be advertisements, you know, on TV or billboards. You might have been driving on a freeway somewhere and seen one of these colleges. I put some examples there. Some of them don't exist anymore right here on this PowerPoint, largely because they imploded from fraud. But I wanted to include that there because this is a story that's been going on for decades. For-profit colleges are a bit different from your public college, like your George Mason, or your private college, like your Georgetown. These are largely profit-driven corporations that provide post-secondary education and workforce training. They're often called trade schools. And so when we talk about trade school abuse, oftentimes these are profit-driven companies. They came into existence because they argue that they're largely filling a void left by public and nonprofit colleges. And to a certain extent, that it's very true. For-profit colleges they pioneered online education. They catered themselves to non-traditional students, largely adult students, people with kids, people with full-time, you know, jobs who couldn't go full-time to your Ivy Leagues or your local state schools and spend full-time, you know, doing classwork. And so, you know, schools like the University of Phoenix, they pioneered online education. They rather than doing semester-based programming, they did, you know, rolling terms that would start, you know, classes would start every 2 weeks. You could do it in the comfort of your own home. And so, you know, for many years, that was their argument. It's like they were filling in a void that public and nonprofit colleges weren't catering to these types of non-traditional students. This has been, you know, these trade schools and for-profit colleges have been around for over 100 years now. I think DeVry dates back to the 1800s. But the key kind of crucial moment in the story of for-profit colleges happened in 1972 when the federal government made them eligible for federal financial aid. They could take out grants, they could take out student loans. These, you know, those grants and student loans that you take out at public and nonprofit colleges, you can literally take these out at University of Phoenix, at an ITT Tech. And so, you know, on paper, their argument that they're filling in this training void, that's all well and good. And it's unfortunate because the reality is so much different, which leads me into my next slide. The reality of for-profit colleges are that the vast majority of them are super expensive. They are more expensive than your traditional public or even private nonprofit college. They're high tuition, they're often low quality, they often lack proper accreditation, and it's almost, you know, widespread across industry. They frequently employ predatory enrollment tactics and misleading marketing strategies. And in the clips that we're about to see from my documentary Failed State, it will kind of get into just how predatory these institutions can be. And what makes this story even more heartbreaking is they disproportionately enroll vulnerable student populations, whether they be low income, minority, first generation college students, veterans, service members, immigrants. It's just, this is, you know, the tagline for Failed State that we often talk about, you know, or I often say at these talks is subprime went to college. the parallels between the subprime mortgage crisis and what we've seen in the for-profit college industry is uncanny. And I think in the clip that you're about to see, I think you'll take away too. So I guess I'll give some context to these clips. This is from my documentary Fail State. The first clip is with a Latino student. His name is Luis. He was raised in Chicago. And I guess, let me see if I can make this clip work. It was having difficulty earlier playing on my end. And in this clip, Lewis talks about seeing the commercials for Westwood College, which was a for-profit college. They had institutions in Illinois, in Texas, and in California, also in Colorado. And so we'll see if this works. All right.
The thing that I've run to with so many for-profit college students is that they walk into a school and they assume it's a noble thing, and that's a dangerous assumption. I mean, imagine if I walked into a used car dealership and thought that the salesman was my friend. They would sell me 12 cars.
I'm waiting in the lobby, I'm all, nervous, like, it's a college interview. I didn't know what to expect. The guy comes out. He was a bald guy, real sharp dressed, nice suit, big watch, a ring probably. Looked like the real deal. Well, from what I would think would be the real deal. He had pictures of his car, his wife, vacation pictures. And he's like, why do you want to come to Westwood College? And I was like, I saw your criminal justice program. And he takes out a list of all the places I could get a job. He starts talking about the criminal justice program, how fast it was. I'm like, well, how much is it? He's like, you know what? You don't have to worry about the price because there's student loans for all this stuff. So you don't have to really pay anything. You get a job, you'll be making all this money. What you're getting is worth gold. I mean, you don't have to worry about the price. You get into the classroom, it's all people like you. I mean, a lot of minorities. We'd sit there with our books like, oh, cool. I mean, we're college students. You run into people like, oh, yeah, I'm going back to school. I'm going to college now. I mean, so it gives you pride. I mean, you're like, oh, puff up your chest.
So I think the takeaway from that clip that I want everyone to is to kind of feel the used car salesman-y type tactics. So in this next clip, which is a much longer clip from the film, the chapter is called The Pain Funnel. And so obviously the film itself is, it's a feature-length film, so you're not going to get the full context. Some of these characters, Lewis included, they were introduced in earlier parts of the film, so you might be missing a little bit of that context to their stories. But this clip in itself, by itself, I think everyone will understand what's going on here. This basically gets into just how predatory these schools can be and the type of psychological enrollment tactics that they can use to compromise their students. So I'll go ahead and play that clip. This is a longer clip.
Here at Fort Campbell, the University of Phoenix is spending thousands of dollars to sponsor this concert. It's one of dozens of events the for-profit school is sponsoring on military bases across the country.
I'm a veteran of the Iraq War. I served in Iraq in 2003 as a military police officer, guarding enemy prisoners of war and doing security generally in southern Iraq. A for-profit college cannot receive more than 90% of their funding from the federal government. The idea behind the 90-10 law was to say, we don't want these institutions to be over-reliant on federal funds.
There's one huge loophole in that, though. Service member benefits don't count against the 90-10 rule.
The traditional expectation was to enroll 9 students every academic session every 8 weeks. But for our team, they had an astronomical expectation of enrolling between 14 and 25. If you didn't meet that target, you would begin feeling the pressure immediately. They would say, remember, DOD doesn't pay your paycheck anymore, we do. Get their ass in class.
I was the first one in my immediate family to graduate high school. I wanted a better life. I knew that college was a way to get to the next level. In 2000, I went to Plattsburgh State University, and I went there for microbiology. I love the human body, the way it works, and I wanted to understand how it worked, and when it stopped working, how to get it back to working. And then,
Oh my God.
September 11th happened during my second year. It just affected me. I didn't feel like I was doing anything important or anything useful. So I signed up for the Marines. I did 2 tours in Iraq. Our unit was the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. We were what they called the tip of the spear. It was our units that were the first ones over. 4 years was enough for me. I finished my enlistment, and then I just wanted to get back to a normal life and go back to school. I just did a computer search for colleges that accept GI Bills. I think it was like an ad on the side, and it said, do you want to go to college? Do you have GI Bill credits? I put my email address into that advertisement, and I got quite a few responses.
All of the students that were reached out to were lead generated. So they came in through a lead database, and there are a variety of lead databases.
There's one particular company called Quinn Street that has dozens of websites that serve as lead generators for the for-profit college industry. They also operated GIBill.com, and it masqueraded as a government website. It looked like you can only use your benefits at for-profit colleges.
I got a phone call. It was representative for DeVry. He said he was in the area and he'd be able to stop by my house. And he ended up scheduling a meeting. The representative was sitting to my right, and he had the application in front of him. Now, I just remember he was going so fast. He assured me that the GI Bill would cover my cost of attendance. In fact, he was certain that with the GI Bill, I would get a return and get a stipend. I questioned it, but he assured me. I was just fresh out of the military. My transition was terrible. My biggest mistake is trusting too many people.
I was at lunch, and the source hands me this packet of documents. They were from the Los Angeles campus of Career Education Corporation's American Intercontinental University.
AIU, the serious you.
They showed that the school was routinely enrolling students who hadn't graduated from high school or gotten a GED. It really opened my eyes to the business model, growth at any cost.
Miami's Fast Train College is famous. They would hire former exotic dancers as recruiters. They would drive around bad neighborhoods and try to get men into the car. It reads like some bad movie script, but it was real.
I had a librarian at Everest call me. She said, I have a student here who's mentally disabled. He came here saying he wanted to be a police officer. He has absolutely no chance, and everybody here knows it, but they want his money.
There was a management person who would refer to students as bottom feeders. The conversation was, now that we lowered the admission standards, how many more bottom feeders is this going to bring in?
They will call you not once,
Hi, Amy.
not twice.
Hi, Amy.
They will call you 20 times a day.
Amy.
Amy. For Amy.
Amy. Hi, Amy.
Lying about job placement rates.
We have some students who are making $600, $700, $800, maybe $1,000 a day.
Lying about how much debt you'll take on.
Will I pay it back? Probably not.
Whatever it took to close the sale.
I know medical assistants that are making $68,000, $69,000 a year, and they only have to school for 9 months.
They can use the pain pitch, poking your pain until you finally agree to sign up.
Somebody says to you, Christmas is coming and I always hate Christmas because it's always a struggle. Well, can you tell me a little more about that? What have you done about that? And did that work? If you know that the answer is no, otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you.
The pain funnel would be a way to get them talking about their feelings.
They're embarrassed because they can't support the kids, they can't buy the Christmas presents. You want to make them relive that embarrassment, make them relive that pain.
What do you think you can do in order to not feel so terrible?
I called and said I'm interested in attending your school. And she asked me what field, and I said I am looking to go into criminal justice. I was wanting to become a victim's advocate. I could talk to families and let them know they aren't all alone in this. I have been on that end of it. She felt so horrible for me. It almost sounded like she was crying for me. She asked me, how was she murdered? She asked me who murdered her. When she was talking about it, I was actually glad somebody actually cared enough to be interested in wanting to know. She, in that hour and a half, became my friend.
Then you could manipulate them to say, well, how are you going to fix it?
She kept informing me that this was the best decision I have ever made and I could really help out all these people. When I talked about, well, how much does it cost to go to college nowadays? She said, well, there are grants and loans and all sorts of stuff you can do, but let's not talk about that right now. I just need to hold your spot because the next session's starting soon. I'm not entirely sure. I actually just started investigating this today. And she said, no, I'll send you the paperwork. This is strictly just to hold your spot. Because your story touched me so much, I want to make sure you had your spot. And I said, okay. I didn't read it, and I wish I had, but I didn't because I trusted her. That paper was not to hold my spot. That paper was to enroll me.
Hi, everyone. Oops, sorry about that. So the film, if you are all interested in watching it, right now it's available on Amazon, iTunes. Our main distributor is STARZ. So if you have STARZ, it's there you can stream it right now. I'm also going to be at the Housing Is conference at the end of April. We're going to be screening the film there, and I'll also be doing a Q&A. So I'm happy to take more questions. I'm sure there'll be questions after this presentation. But I guess to bring it back to the point and purpose of this presentation, how does this apply to public housing authorities? And I think a lot of this is more of a discussion with all of you because my expertise, my colleague Alex's expertise, we're in the student loan debt space, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard that some of your housing residents have student loan debt. I mean, we talk about the student loan debt crisis all the time in the news. what's happening at the for-profit colleges is the very worst. This is the literal front lines of the student loan debt crisis. And the fact sheet that we shared with you prior to this webinar, and it's going to be available past this webinar, has so many different facts, so many different statistics that basically, one, prove our point that this is a massive crisis that needs to be addressed. And then two, gives you sources and examples of just how this applies to your work. And, you know, in the presentation right now, I say public housing is on the front lines. For-profits are disproportionately enrolling vulnerable student populations, and they intentionally target those student populations. In the fact sheet that we shared with you, we just selected a couple of a long list of different instances where for-profit colleges recruited directly from homeless shelters, where they actually, I didn't even get the chance to include it in this one, but, you know, one for-profit college was recruiting people who were just recently incarcerated and they just got out of jail or prison. In a lot of instances, like schools like Kaplan, they were targeting Section 8 public housing. And so back to that idea of, you know, discussion points. And I'm not fully, I don't know how much authority public housing, you know, housing authorities have over like who they can let in onto their, you know, who can advertise to their residents, what sort of tools that you can do. And that's something that when, you know, Abra reached out to me, we connected and we started talking and brainstorming different ideas, what public housing authorities can do to help protect their residents, because it's, in a lot of cases, the way we've created the financial aid system in our country today, it needs to be addressed as a consumer protection issue. In the next slide, before I get into it, I had the opportunity last year to interview a for-profit college victim who was directly recruited. She was living in a public housing project, so we'll get into that in a second. But I want to also pass it over to my colleague, Alex Elson, who has direct firsthand experience you know, representing students who've been defrauded by these institutions.
Thanks, Alex. It's an excellent summary. I think one of the main purposes here for us is to just increase your awareness of this issue and to sort of have, you know, an antenna up for when you may see or have or hear from residents about schools trying to either advertise or come in and convince residents to enroll. Everything Alex said about targets and who the schools target and how is accurate. These schools love direct mailers and communicating to people through direct mailing and also through TV commercials. Single mothers are a frequent target. People who are unemployed or first in the family to attend college, who have generally low sophistication about college, and like we all do, trust colleges as a general matter that to be looking out for the interests of students or potential students. There's not as much of a common understanding that some colleges will be doing that. Your local community colleges, in all likelihood, will be doing that, but there's also a segment of predatory schools that are not doing that, and they are more like car salesmen than they are like actual college recruiters that you would think are there to help you. And there's just an inherent trust that we have for colleges that does not exist with these schools, and the trust should not be placed in these schools. And we'll talk more about how you recognize and like strategies for figuring out what schools may be problematic and what will not in a minute. The other thing that they will often target is individuals that just have a lack of sophistication regarding financial products such as loans and grants. Everything will be covered, everything will be paid for, the government will cover you. And it's really, they're taking out student loans, which if the product was good would be okay, because in general, college is a good thing. But for students who end up in these institutions, it often will leave them with lifetime of debt and nothing to show for it. So it really is making people worse off than if they had not gone at all. And so raising awareness about that, I think, is one of our main purposes here, and knowing that there is very aggressive marketing, very aggressive salesmanship. They spend, and are often criticized for this for obvious reasons, a lot more money on marketing and on advertising than they do on actual instruction for students. Alex, we'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Alex. And I think, I mentioned it briefly prior that we had the opportunity to interview a student out in Los Angeles who was directly recruited from a housing project. So I'll just jump right into that right now. So her name's Marie. She was living in the Imperial Courts housing project, and she was sitting there. She had a newborn child. She had a 3-year-old, if my memory serves me correctly at the time too, and she was just sitting there unemployed. And there was a sudden knock on her door, and she opened the door. No one was there, but there was a flyer, and it was a flyer advertising California Institute. And on the flyer itself, it said in big bold letters, "Get paid to go to school." And Marie was at the end of her unemployment benefits. She was worried about how she was going to provide for her children. And she decided one day to give a call. And very similar to what you saw in the clips that I showed from Fail State, she was quickly rushed through the enrollment process. I mean, in her interview, when I interviewed her, she talked about how quickly, rather than she called just for information, like general information about the California Institute. They were like, "Well, when do you want to come for orientation?" And then, Marie pushed back a little bit and was saying, "I just want to get some more information about the school. What does it entail?" And she said, they said all your questions be answered at orientation. And they basically used kind of this used car salesman tactics, this kind of timeshare things that you often hear about to basically get her to enroll. And the unfortunate instance with Marie's case was she enrolled at the institution. Within a couple of days of starting her classes, she became really sick and she had to drop out. Unfortunately, the institution, which later turned out to be completely fraudulent, the owner was stealing the student's financial aid. They refused to return her student loans, even though that school was legally required to do so because she had dropped out so quickly into the term. And so and here's the big kicker here. And during the interview, my mouth dropped. Her original $5,500 balance that she took out to go to school has ballooned to over $100,000. And she's been fighting this for over 25 years. This happened in the late 80s, early 1990s. The owner has been on the run from the FBI. Yet the Department of Education and her loan servicer refuses to give her the discharge that she was entitled to in the first place. And so she's still fighting this. And so I wanted to show just 2 little short clips from the interview. Her full story will be available on the Student Defense website later this year. We're launching a really big story bank that kind of details all sorts of different stories. Marie is going to be one of them. But I picked 2 clips from her full interview that I thought perfectly embodied this conversation when she talks about being recruited and what that impact has had on her. So I'll go ahead and play the clip. It's a very short clip. What's that?
We was all low-income students from the Imperial Courts Project. They target the Imperial Courts Project because it was flyers all over. They know it was low-income people in there, and they know some of us was trying to improve ourselves. Even if they didn't know, they still target us to get us in there because it was free money. They get you at the time that you're at your lowest. And at that time, I was at my lowest. And I'm sure a lot of us was at our lowest at that time. And that's when they took advantage of us. It's like they just preyed on us and just didn't give us a chance. But I don't want anyone else to go through what I have went through. It's been 30-some years that I'm still trying to get this loan off of me.
Yeah, and so we'll quickly wrap this up. My colleague Alex and I will say final things. We want to open it up to questions because I'm sure a lot of you have questions. We're much better at Q&A than we are at presenting stuff. But I think, back to the key takeaways, at least from my end of it, it's you are all on the front lines. The target market of predatory for-profit colleges tend to be people who live in public housing, who are low income. As my colleague Alex Elson said, they don't have the close circle that can help them navigate how complex higher education can be. And, higher education issues are often described in terms of economic, race, and equality issues. I want everyone to walk away here from this presentation understanding that this is also a consumer protection issue. The federal financial aid system, there's good intents behind it to give access to higher education, but the way we've built the foundation, having it be loans, having it be grants, it's largely it's a consumer space. It's decision making. We're giving consumers choice here, and so we need to really understand that this is consumer protection because, this is an issue. The for-profit college story has impacted millions of students across this country with effectively life-ruining debt. Alex, do you want to talk a bit before we open up to questions?
Yeah, just one sort of closing thought as far as tools. How do you know? This is a question we get all the time, and it is difficult to answer. This school? How do I know if this is a bad school or a good school? And it's not just is it a for-profit college or not anymore. It used to be a much easier question. But now a lot of for-profit colleges are actually converting to nonprofit status, but through a complicated set of transactions, it's really the same business model. And so if you ask the question, are you for-profit or nonprofit? The answer may legitimately be we are nonprofit, but the school still is engaging in the same practices. So what sorts of things can you do without spending a lot of time or going to review data? I mean, I have found that just a very simple search on Wikipedia can tell you a lot about if there are red flags or not. Usually at the bottom of a Wikipedia page. Not that everything on Wikipedia is accurate, but at the bottom of the page there will usually be a section for investigations and lawsuits against the school. And if that is a long list, that is a red flag, and then you should look further or ask more questions or educate to the extent possible residents about that. And as Alex said, there's just a simple car salesman test. If there are recruiters coming onto the premises, or if there are flyers that look like they are trying to sell you a car, not an education, that is usually a sign that the school is engaging in aggressive tactics to recruit and enroll people. The local community college generally does not do that. So that's another red flag. And then if there's any sort of evasive responses on how much it costs, or don't worry about costs, or student loans will cover it, or that kind of thing in conversations or in any sort of mailings, that's also a red flag. So those are just some small, quick and dirty ways you can tell if you don't recognize the name of the school, if it's not the local community college that's there, you can check to see, might this be a bad actor or not?
Great.
Thanks,
well,
Alex.
I see some folks typing. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the public chat box, which you can find that in the bottom right hand of the screen. While people are still thinking of a couple things, some things that I would also be curious to know about from some of you is if this is something you've heard about from, I see we mostly, not entirely, but predominantly have folks from housing authorities on today with us. So if you could share if this is something you've heard from residents, that would be something that I think would be really useful as we think about how to move this work forward. Today is just the beginning. And then also, while folks are still thinking, I'm going to go ahead and put a link. For those of you who don't know, we are launching a leadership institute focused on post-secondary issues. So if you are either an education partner or a housing authority, a CLPHA member housing authority, and you want to apply to be a part of this, you can find the link right there. And I'm happy to answer any more questions about that as well. So I see we have a question that's come in. It says, a lot of this seems like a financial literacy issue, especially when it comes to student loans. Can you recommend any financial literacy programs or presentations that housing authorities could share with residents?
I could take that first question, Nelson. It's financial literacy, but it's also just getting general information about American higher education. I think there's a report that I included in the fact sheet that I think is really relevant to any housing authority audience members that are listening right now. It was by Johns Hopkins. It followed 150 African-American youth, most of them who grew up in public housing in Baltimore. And they were basically, a lot of it, what they were drawn to for-profit colleges because they lacked adequate counseling, just general counseling on what the differences are between for-profit colleges and regular traditional colleges. And also just the lure of promises of immediate employment in a career. In that report, that study just gets really into the nitty-gritty. And that last part is really important because for-profit colleges, they basically promise the moon very quickly. And to people who, are looking for a lifeline out, who, might be just, they're looking for anything to help their family, the promises that these colleges will make, they are too good to be true. And it's hard sometimes because, to go to a nonprofit college, you also need to take out student loans. Sometimes to go to community college, you also need to take out student loans. And it's not a frequent occurrence, but sometimes it needs to happen for some students. And so there is financial literacy, Jenny, like that's very important, but it's not the end all be all. I think there needs to be direct outreach to residents to let them know, that they're, not all college programs are created equal. In terms of financial literacy programs or presentations that PHA can share, let me look into that. I'll get back. I'll send it to Abra, who will forward it out. I'm always hesitant, from my side of things, I'm always hesitant to just point people in directions of data. If you just give the person better data, they'll make better decisions. But a lot of this has to do with behavioral economics. Back to what I said before, if people are looking for a lifeline out, the lure of immediate results is very, very attractive. And it's just how oftentimes these recruiters will really pitch it on. Why go to community college and wait a number of years to get into a nursing program when you can start next week at our school and be done in 18 months? It's basically all kind of wrapped into that.
Just to echo, financial literacy, student loans in general, are very complicated, and financial literacy, I think, would have certainly helped me. It would help all of us. But this specific problem we're talking about, when it comes to predatory colleges, the schools are generally lying to people about what they are providing. So financial literacy at that stage wouldn't help. It's more just general understanding and awareness of who you are talking to and what they're trying to sell you and what their history is. Looking up, Googling the school even, or looking up complaints on Facebook pages or the Better Business Bureau. That's the kind of thing that at the outset we want to encourage people to do. Then you'll see all of the back and forth, the complaints, students sharing what their real experiences have been, and you won't get into the position where you're like some of the you heard from in the clips, where it's by that point too late.
Yeah, so I think while folks are typing and thinking, I don't know if any of you have had experiences that you want to share about possibly arranging for a college fair for your residents, or maybe individual counseling that you've done or some of your staff have done with residents, if that's something that you have questions about, maybe different tactics to take, or Alex has provided a couple of different research points to look into before inviting certain people. And then conversely, if you're thinking about how to best communicate this type of information to residents, if that's something that either you've done in your community or have questions about how to do, that's sort of the conversation that I see us as being able to make a difference in this space.
And yeah, Jenny, thanks a lot for that question. It's a really good question. I think it's back to it's almost like the training, the thing that I think housing authorities, if you all have the bandwidth, I know there's just a million different things that your residents are dealing with and juggling all the time. But it's kind of like to get people to get the residents to understand that, like, when they go to these recruiting sessions, they should treat it like they're going to a used car sales lot. It's I've had the opportunity to interview over 100 college victims over the years, and often the recurring thing that I hear over and over again is, well, I thought, my high school counselor, I trusted what my high school counselor was saying. So when I went to this, recruiter and I talked with him about the college, I just assumed it was like the high school counselor. They had the best interest at my heart. But because it's a for-profit college, the incentive structure is way different than it is at a high school. And so oftentimes students will literally just walk into recruiters' rooms, and it's just like, a wolf and a sheep, basically. And these recruiter sessions are literally like boiler rooms. Like, they have numbers they need to make, and they're going to try to hit it, and they're going to try to get the student to enroll before they leave that room. And regardless of the numbers that they share, I had also had the opportunity to talk with a lot of whistleblowers who used to work as recruiters at for-profit colleges, and they are really savvy at how to basically downplay any sort of hesitation that a student might have prior to enrolling. You can actually give the student perfect information. They don't even need to lie about it. The best example I have of this is, if I'm required by the federal government to tell you that my school has a 10% graduation rate, that can tell the student one of two things. One, the school is so difficult that only 10% graduate, or two, the school's so bad that only 10% graduate. And regardless of that, the recruiter can flip it all on its head onto the student and say, well, you'll be part of that 10%. And back to the behavioral economics of it, it's everyone's going to bet on themselves. They always believe in themselves. And it's like dieting almost. It's just like, you think, yeah, I'm going to finally do it. I'm going to go on a diet, and I'm going to become like the image the vision that I want to have. Is the same thing here. It's the recruiter will paint such a rosy picture of what they can attain in such a short period of time that you can tell them all the accurate information, but they can flip it on its head, and they can make the student make an emotional decision.
Great, thank you. And I was just typing a response to Kathy. She shares that in Chicago, this is something they've experienced with having for-profit colleges flyer their properties and target their families. So they have a really great and strong partnership, and also a grant aid partnership with City Colleges, which is a community college program, consortium. But she says one of the hardest challenges is having our community college programs remain more competitive than the lure of the promises that we've been discussing. So for things like the speed and flexibility of completing a program. And Kathy, I was just about to type, and for anybody else from a housing authority who's on, are there any rules about, I know it would be different for voucher holders, but for public housing properties, are there any rules about who would be allowed to come out and distribute flyers or information like that? Knowing, of course, that enforcing something is different than there actually being rules in place. Got it. Okay. So for those of you who are just on the phone, Kathy said that there's no soliciting allowed on property, but it still happens. Great. So while Kathy's typing, we have about 5 minutes left. So if folks have other questions or experiences that they want to share, please do so in the public chat box. And again, Alex, and I'd like to also formally invite other Alex to join us as well at the summit. He's in DC, so hopefully he can come on by. But we will be screening the film and then also having an opportunity to do a Q&A session and really talk through more of these brainstorming ideas about how we can better get this information out to the residents that all of you serve at the summit. So I know, actually I think probably everyone who is tuning into the webinar live right now is already registered for the summit, which is wonderful and amazing. But for those of you who are listening to the recording at a later date, please look in the chat box to see that link to register and join us. So if you have final thoughts, please go ahead and type those in the chat box.
I think, Abra, to play off of what you just said about like what housing authorities can do, and I think that's something that where my colleague Alex and I, that's not our expertise, but it's something that basically on, my vision of what I think could happen is that if housing authorities could figure out a way to get this proper, information out to their residents, that there's predatory colleges out there and that their residents need to be aware of that. That can just do an enormous amount of good. Obviously, I think the brainstorming needs to be, it needs to be a group discussion. Everyone needs to be involved. But in terms of like using the metaphor of like slowing the bleeding in this space, because we have, my colleague Alex can talk a lot at length about it, because our Department of Education, they're no longer really a police officer on this beat. A lot of potential, students now and in the coming years, they're sitting ducks. And so it's just, how can we prevent the worst cases from happening? How can we prevent these students from falling victim to these schools? Alex, if you want to talk about maybe what the Department of Education is doing right now.
I mean, very briefly, they are gutting every single protection that is intended to prevent this type of conduct. They are changing the way the accreditation system works. There are basically two sets of rules, one to prevent fraud and one to sort of provide loan forgiveness after the fact, after students have been defrauded and have shown that. The second is called borrower defense to repayment. The first is called the gainful employment regulations. And this Department of Education has basically hit select all and delete for gainful employment, which means there's going to be no accountability anymore for schools that are signing people up, and then at the end of the day, students are not making enough money to basically pay back their loans. There used to be regulations that govern that space, and she has selected all and deleted. We've just filed a large lawsuit challenging her repeal of that regulation. Similarly, with students who have already been harmed under the borrower defense regulation, it's been completely watered down and made almost impossible when this new rule takes effect, which will be later this year, for students to get relief after they've been defrauded. So it's a complete rollback of all protections for students and giveaways like left and right to the for-profit college industry. The department is essentially now being run by former executives and lobbyists for the for-profit college industry specifically. So there is not right now a friend in Washington for students, and it makes it even more important for people on the front lines to just increase awareness so students don't end up in these situations like we've been saying.
Great. Yeah, I think everyone joining would definitely agree that this is a really critical issue and really affects the people that they're serving. So I think, folks, if you have any final questions or thoughts, quickly type them now. If otherwise, you can always send me an email after the fact. I'm happy to pass anything along to our wonderful presenters from today or answer any questions that I'm able to. As we've mentioned, this is just the beginning of this conversation. Some of you are already doing some really fantastic work in this area, but we're really pleased to be able to partner and showcase this issue even further and really brainstorm and come up with actionable ways to help improve things for people going forward. So thank you so much to both of our presenters today. It was really fantastic to have you. We're really excited to have you join us again on April 30th in the evening to watch more of the film and talk about it further. But really appreciate your expertise and your commitment to this important issue.
Thank you, Abra.
Yes, thank you very much.
And thank you everyone for joining and who are going to be watching this from, after the fact. If you have any questions too, feel free to send to Abra. The student defense website is defendstudents.org. And for fail state, it's just failstatemovie.com. And the film Fail State is available right now. You don't even need to wait till April 30th. You can watch it. But I will be there at the housing conference, and we'll be showing it. And can't wait to hear your ideas in terms of like how to stop this.
Great. Well, I will send a follow-up email in the next day or so with the link to the recording, as well as, again, the fact sheet that Alex and Alex provided to share with all of you. So thank you so much, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.